Hey guys, Renan Lopez here, and on this episode we're gonna talk about useReducer. The useReducer allows us in an organized way share state between our components. For performance, the useReducer it works very well with the useCallback and React memo. On this episode we update a counter application from using current state from the component to use the useReducer and change the state to increment and decrement the number of the counter. And as a bonus, on the end of this video you will see the way we handle with the useCallback and React memo to improve performance with the useReducer. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. To start, we're gonna have a look in what we currently have at the project. This is the result. Basically, we have a counter, and this counter starts with 0. Every time we click on add function, it adds one number to our state, and we reduce one number from our state. Here, we have basically a function called app, and this function uses the counter state and the set counter to actually set the state. We are setting default as a 0, and then we use this anonymous function here, passing the counter -1. So basically, every time we click on this button here, reduce, we'll execute the set counter and pass counter -1, and here we pass the set counter +1 in the case of adding. So in our counter button we have an on-click function and a button text being passed by props, and basically what we do, we pass the on-click on the button, the function on-click we send from our parent, and then here we set the actually text sent from props. In order to improve that and use the useReducer, first we need to create our initial state the same way we do on Redux. So first we create a constant, and this constant I will call initial state, and this initial state will have a count 0. Okay, now we create a function called reducer, and this reducer receives two parameters, and these parameters are first the state and the second the action. Okay, and here we will have a switch. We called here action type, and here, in case this will be increment, for example, I will return count will be state.count +1, and case decrement return count. And the default I will throw a new error. So basically the reducer receives two parameters, the state and the action. In our switch we receive the action type, and then we check if our action type is increment, so return this state. If the case is decrement, we return this state. So now we need to import useReducer from our React. So now to use that, we use here, instead of using the state, we use useReducer. And as a parameter we pass the reducer function we created up there and our initial state. And here we don't have a counter and a set counter, we have a state and the dispatch. So let's try to actually execute, instead of the set counter, the dispatch. Call the dispatch, and here we will pass the type, I will pass the decrement. Dispatch, and I will do the same for the increment, pass instead of decrement, increment. Okay, and now instead of counter we pass what? We have count here, so we pass state.count, and here we go, it's working as should. So you can see that we don't need the useState anymore, we just need the useReducer, and this useReducer returns the actual state and the dispatch. The dispatch is called using the type to actually pass through our reducer. But here we still have a problem. Here in our counter button I'm consoling the render every time this counter button it renders. So here we have 2, we have 4, and so on and so on. It means we are rendering all the time the counter button. In order to fix that, we use something called React memo, which keeps actually rendering because we have an anonymous function here. In order to fix that, we need to use the useCallback. So let me import the useCallback from here. To use that we need to create two constants, one called decrement, and here we use useCallback, and here we will pass the function we want to memoize. So we actually pass the dispatch, and here we pass the type, the same we are actually executing here. So I can actually remove this from here, and at the same I can do it here. And the second parameter here, we need to pass actually an array of dependencies. It means everything this change, we actually need to change the memoized function is so dispatch. Here we pass our decrement function, memoized, and here our increment function. So use callback here. Okay, now we have two renders here. So if we add, it's not re-rendering. It's very good to organize in separated files. So this is the way to use the same thing using the state and using the useReducer. If you are used to Redux, it's basically the same using functions. If you like this episode, give your like and subscribe to the channel. And see you soon.